A very good morning, friends. Today we will be discussing the chapter 2, Desire, from the book Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. This is a very powerful book. It helps us to think like a rich person and achieve and become a rich person. There are around 12 steps to think and grow rich, which I have given you in my last chapter, last video. You can go through it and remember the same thing which I am going to read in every chapter, and you will understand in detail manner. If you are not subscribed to the channel, request you to subscribe to the channel so that you get latest updates about the same. Now let us start with the chapter 2, Desire, the starting point of all achievement, the first step towards riches. When Edwin C. Brace when Edwin C. Brace climbed down from the freight train in Orange, NG. More than 30 years ago, he may have resembled a tramp, but his thoughts were those of a king. As he made his way from the railroad track to the Thomas A. Edison's office, his mind was at work. He saw himself standing in Edison's presence. He heard himself asking Mr. Edison for an opportunity to carry out the one consuming portion of his life, a burning desire to become the business associates of great inventor. Brain's desire was not a hope, it was not a wish, it was a keen, pul- pulsating desire which transited everything else. It was a definite. The desire was not new when he approached Edison. He it had been Blaine's dominating desire for a long time. In the beginning, when the desire first appeared in his mind, it may have been probably was only a wish, but it was no mere wish when he appeared before Edison with it. A few years later, Edwin again stood before Edison in the same office where he first met inventor. This time his desire had been translated into reality. He was in business with Edison. The dominating dream of his life had become a reality. Today, people who know brains envy him because of the break life yield him. They see him in the days of his triumph without taking the trouble to investigate the cause of his success. Brain succeeded because he chose a different goal, play, placed all his energy, all his willpower, all his efforts, everything back of that goal. He did not become the partner of Edison the day he arrived. He was contented to start in the most menial work, as long as it provided an opportunity to take even one step towards his cherished goal. 5 years passed before the chance he had been seeking made its appearance. During all those years. Not one ray of hope, not one promise of attainment of his desire had been held out to him, to everyone's except himself. He appeared only another clock in the Edison's business wheel, but in his own mind, he was the partner of Edison every minute of the time from the very day that he first went to work there. It is a remarkable illustration of the work power of a definite desire. Blaines won his goal because he wanted to be a business associate of Mr. Edison. More than he wanted anything else, he created a plan by which he to attain that purpose. But he burned all the bridges behind him. He stood by his desire until it became the dominating opposition of his life and finally a fact. When he went to Orange, he did not say to himself, I will try to induce Edison to give me a job of some sort. He said, I will see Edison and put him on the notice that I have come to go into the business with him. He did not say, I will work there for a few months and if I get no encouragement, I will quit and get a business job somewhere else. He did not. He did say, I will start anywhere. I will do anything Edison tells me to do. But before I am through, I will be his associates. He did not say, I will keep my eyes open for another opportunity in case I fail to get what I want in the Edison's organization. He said, there is but one thing in this world that I am determined to have, and that is the business association with Thomas A. Edison. I will burn all the bridges behind me and stake my entire future on my ability to get what I want. To he left himself no possible way to retreat. He had to win or perish. That is all there is to the Braden's story of success. A long while ago, a great warrior faced a situation which made it necessary for him to make a decision which ensured his success on the battlefield. He was about to send his armies against a powerful foe whose men outnumbered his own. He loaded his soldiers into a boat, sailed to the enemy's country, unloaded soldiers, and equipped them, gave the orders to burn the ships that had that had carried them, addressing his men before the first battle. He said, you see the boats going up in the smoke. That means that we cannot leave this shore alive unless we win. We now have no choice. We win or we perish. They won. Every person who wins in any undertaking must be willing to burn his ship and cut all the source of retreat. Only by so doing can one be sure of maintaining that state of mind known as a burning desire to win, essential to success. The morning after the Great Chicago Fire, a group of merchants stood on the state street looking at the smoking remains of what had been their shows. They went into the conference to decide if they would try to rebuild or leave Chicago and start over in a more promising section of the country. They reached a decision, all except one, to leave the Chicago. The merchant who decided to stay and rebuild pointed a finger at the remains of his stores and said, gentlemen, on that very spot I will build the world's greatest store, no matter how many times it may burn down. That was more than 50 years ago the store was built. It stands there today, a towering momentum to the power of that state of mind known as a burning desire. The easy thing for the Marshall Field to have done would have been exactly what his fellow merchant did when the going was hard and the future looked dismissal. They pulled up and went where the going seemed easier. Mark well this difference between the Marshall Field and other merchants, because it is the same difference which distinguishes Edwin C. Baines from thousands of other young men who had worked in Edison's organization. It is the difference which distinguishes practically all who succeeded from those who failed. Every human being who reaches the age of understanding of the purpose of money wishes for it. Wishing will not bring riches, but desiring riches with a state of mind that becomes an opposition, then planning definite ways and means to achieve the riches and backing those plans with persistence, which does not recognizes failure, will bring riches. The method by which the desire for the rich can be transmuted into its financial equivalent consists of six definite practical steps. Namely, the first, fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. It is not sufficient merely to say, I want plenty of money. Be definite as to the amount. There is a psychology reason for definiteness which will be described in the subsequent chapter. The second, determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money you desire. There is no reality as something for nothing. Third, establish a definite date when you intend to possess the money you desire. Fourth, create a definite plan for carrying out your desire and begin at the once, whether you are ready or not, to put this plan into action. The fifth, write out a clear, conscious statement of the amount of money you intend to acquire. Name to the time limit for its acquisition, the state which what you intend to give in return for the money, and describe clearly the plan through which you intend to accumulate it. The sixth, read your return statement aloud twice daily, once just before retiring at night and once after arising in the morning. As you read, see, and feel and believe you yourself already in possession of the money. It is important that you follow the instructions described in these six steps. It is especially important that you observe and follow the instructions in the sixth paragraph. You may complain that it is impossible for you to see yourself in the possession of money before you actually have it. Here is a way the burning desire will come to your aid. If you truly desire money so keenly that your desire is an opposition, you will have no definite difficulties in convincing yourself that you will acquire it. The object is to want the money and to become so determined to have it that you convince yourself you will have it. Once those who become money conscious ever accumulate great riches. Money consciousness means that mind has become so thoroughly stagnated with desire for the money that one can see one's self already in the possession of it. To the uninitiated who had not been schooled in the working principles of human mind, this instructions may appear impractical. It may be helpful to all who fail to recognize the soundness of the six steps, to know that the information they convey was received from the Andrew Carnegie, who became as an ordinary laborer in the steel mill, but managed, despite his humble beginning, to make these principles yield him a fortune of considerably more than $100 million. It may be of further help to know that the six steps here recommended were carefully scrutinized by the late Thomas A. Edison, who placed his stamp of approval upon him them as being not only the steps essential for the accumulation of money but necessary for attainment of any definite goal. The steps call for no hard labor. They call for no sacrifice. They do not require one to become ridiculous or credulous. To apply them calls for no great amount of education, but the successful application of these six steps does call for sufficient imagination to enable one to see and to understand that accumulation of money cannot be left to a chance, good fortune, and luck. One must realize that all who have accumulated great fortune first did a certain amount of dreaming, hoping, wishing, desiring, and planning before they acquired money. You may as well know right here that you can never have riches in great quantities unless you can work yourself into a white heat of desire for money and actually believe you will possess it. You may as well know the also that every great leader from the dawn of civilization down to the present was a dreamer. Christianity is a great potential power in the world today because its founder was an insane dreamer, uh, uh, who had vision and imagination to see realities in their mental and spiritual form before they had been transmitted into the physical form. If you do not see the great riches in your imagination, you will never see them in your bank balance. Never in the history of America has there been so great an opportunity for the practical dreamers as now exists. The 6 years economic collapse has reduced all men substantially to the same level. A new race is about to be run. The stakes represents huge fortune which will be accumulated within the next 10 years. The rules of the race have changed because we now live in a changed world that definitely favors the masses. Those who had but little ill or no opportunity to win under the conditions existing during the depression when fear paralyzed growth and development. We who are in this race for riches should be encouraged to know that this change the world in which we live in is demanding new ideas, new ways of doing things, new leaders, new inventions, new methods of teaching, new methods of marketing, new books, new literatures, new futures for the radio, or new ideas for moving pictures. Back to of all this demand for the new and better things, there is one quality which one must possess to win, and that is definiteness of purpose, the knowledge of what one wants and a burning desire to possess it. The business depression marked the death of one age and the birth of another. This change the world requires practical dreamers who can and will put their dreams into action. The practical dreamers have always been and always will be the pattern makers of civilization. We who desire to accumulate riches should remember the real leaders of the world, although have been men who has and put into practical use the intangible, unseen in force of unborn opportunity and have converted those forces or impulse of thoughts into the skyscrapers, cities, factories, airplanes, automobiles, and every form of convenience that makes the life more pleasant. Tolerance and an open mind are practical necessity of the dreamers of today. Those who are afraid of the new ideas are doomed before they start. Never has there been a time more favorable to the pinners than and the present. True, there is no wind and holy west to the be conquered, as in the days of covered wagons, but there is a vast business, financial, and industrial world to be remolded and redirected along the new and better lines. In the planning to acquire your share of riches, let no one influence you to score the dreamers to win the big stakes in the a change world. You must catch the spirit of the great planners of the past, those whose dreams have been given to the civilization all that it had of value, the spirit which serves as the lifeblood of our own country, your opportunity and mine to develop and market our talents. Let us not forget Columbus dreamed of an unknown world, staked his life on the existence of such a world, and discovered it. The great astronomer dreamed of the multiplicity of the world and revealed them. No one denounced him as impractical. After he had tramped, instead the world worshipped at his shine, thus proving once more that the success requires no apologies, failure permits no albis. Is if the things you wish to do is right and you believe it is, go ahead and do it. Put your dreams across and never mind what they say. If you meet with temporary defeat for their a purpose, do not know that every failure brings with it a seed of an equivalent success. Henry Ford, the poor and uneducated dreamer, dreamed of the horseless carriage, went to the work with what tools he possessed without waiting for opportunity to favor him, and now the evidence of his dream belt the entire earth. He had put more wheels into the operation than any man who ever lived, because he was not afraid to back his dreams. Thomas Edison dreamed of the lamp that could be operated by the electricity. He began where he stood to put his dreams into action, and despite more than 10,000 failures, he stood by that dream until he made it practical, physical reality. The practical dreamers do not quit. Practical dreamers do not quit. Warren dreamed of the chain of cigar stores, transformed his dreams into actions, and now the United Cigar Stores occupy the best corners in America. Lincoln dreamed of the freedom for black slaves, but his dream into action and barely missed the living to see a united North and South translated his dreams into reality. The Wright brothers dreamed of the machine that would fly through the air. Now one may see the evidence all over the world that they dreamed soundly. Marconi dreamed of the systems for harnessing the intangible forces of ether. Evidence that he did not dream in vain may be found in every wireless and radio in the world. Moreover, Marconi's dreams he brought the humblest cabin and the most stately manor house side by side. It made the people of every nation on the earth backdoor neighbor. It gave the President of United States a medium by which he may talk to all the people of America at one time. And on the short notice, it may interest you to know that McConnell's friend had him taken into custody and examined in a psychologistic hospital when he announced he had discovered a principle through which he could send a message to the air without the aid of wires or other direct physical means of communication. The dreamer of today fare better. The world has become accommodated to the new discoveries. Nay, it has shown a willingness to reward the dreamers who give the world a new ideas. The greatest achievement was at first and for the time but a dream. The oak sleeps in the acorn, the birds wait in the eggs, and in the highest vision of the soul, a waking agent strikes. Dreams are the seedlings of the reality. Awake, arise, and assert yourself, you dreamers of the world. Your start is now in the ascendancy. The the world depression brought the opportunity you had been waiting for. It taught the people humanity tolerance, and open mindedness. The world is filled with an abundance of opportunity which the dreamers of the past never knew. A burning desire to be and to do is the starting point from which the dreamers must take off. The dreams are not born of indifference, laziness, or lack of ambition. The world no longer scoffs at the dreamers nor calls him impractical. If you think it does, take a trip to tendencies and witness what a dreamer president has done in the way of harassing and using the great water power for Mecca a score of years ago. Such a dream would have seemed like a madness. You have been disappointed. You have undergone defeat during the depression. You have felt the great heat within you, crashed until it bleeds. Take courage, for this experience have tempered the spiritual mental of which you are made. They are assets of incomparable value. Remember, too, that all you succeed in life gets off to a bad start and pass through many heartbreaking struggles before they arrive. The turning point in the life of those who succeed usually comes at the moment of some crisis through which they are introduced to their best selves. John Benny wrote the Pilgrim's Progress, which is among the finest of all English literature. After he had been confined in the prisons and solely punished because of his views of the subject of religion, Henry discovered the genius which slept within his brain after he had met with a great misfortune and was confined in the prison cell in Columbus, being forced there through the misfortune to become acquainted with his other self and to use his imagination. He discovered himself to be the great author instead of miserable criminal and outcast. Straight and varied are the ways of life, and the stranger still are the ways of infinite intelligence through which men are sometimes forced to undergo all sort of punishment before discovering their own brains and their own capacity to create useful ideas through imagination. Edison, the world's greatest inventor and the scientist, was a tramp and telegraph operator. He failed innumerable times before he was driven finally to discovery of the genius which slept within his brain. Charles Dickinson gave began by pasting labels on the blacking pots. The tragedy of his first love penetrated the depth of his soul and converted him into one of the world's truly great authors. The tragedy produced first David Copperfield, then a succession of other works that made his this richer and better world for all who read his books. Disappointment over love affairs generally has the effect of driving men to drink and women to run, and this because most people never learn the art of transmuting their strongest emotion into the dreams of constructive nature. Helen Keller became deaf, dumb, and blind shortly after the birth. Despite her greatest misfortune, she has written her name indelibly in the page of the history of the great. Her entire life has served as evidence that no one ever is defeated until the defeat has been accepted as a reality. Robert Burns was a literate country lad. He was cursed by the poverty and grew up to a drunkard in the bargain. The world was made better for his having lived because he floated beautiful thoughts in the poetry and began thereby plucked a thorn and planted a rose in its place. Booker T. E. Washington was born in slavery, handicapped by race and color. Because he was tolerant, had an open mind at all times on all subjects, and was a dreamer, he left his impress for good on an entire race. Beethoven was deaf, Milton was blind, but their names was last as long as the time endures, because they dreamed and translated their dreams into organized thoughts. Before passing to the next chapter, um, kindle a new in your mind the fire of hope, the faith, the courage, and tolerance. If you have this state of mind and working knowledge of the principles described, all else that you need will come to you when you are ready for it. Let emission state the thought in these words. Every proverb, every book, every byword that belongs to the thief for aid and comfort, say, surely come home through open or winding pages, passages. Every friend whom not the Thai fantastic will, but the great and tender soul in the cavet shall lock the thee in his embrace. There is a difference between wishing for things and being ready to receive it. No one is ready for the thing until he believes he can acquire it. The state of mind must be belief, not mirror hope for or wish. Open mindedness is essential for belief. Closed mind do not inspire faith, courage, and belief. Remember, no more my efforts is required to aim high in life, to demand abundance and prosperity than is required to accept the misery and poverty. A great poet has correctly stated in his this universal truth through these lines. I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening when I counted my scanty stores. For life is a just employer. He gives you what you ask, but once you have set the wages, why you must bear the task. I worked for a mirror hire only to learn dismayed that any wage I had asked of life would have willingly paid. Desire outwit Mother Nature. As a fitting climax to this chapter, I wish to introduce one of the most unusual person I have ever known. I first saw him 24 years ago, a few minutes after he was born. He came into the world without any physical sign of years, and the doctors admitted when pressed for an opinion that the child might be deaf and mute for the life. I challenged the doctor's opinion. I had right to do so. I was a child's father. I too reached a decision and rendered an opinion that, but I expressed the opinion slightly in the secrecy of my own heart. I decided that my son would hear and speak. Nature would send me a child without ears, but nature would not induce me to accept the reality of affiliation. In in my own mind, I knew that my son would not would hear and speak. How I was sure there must be a way, and I knew I would find it. I thought of the words of immortal emission. The whole course of things goes to teach us the faith. We need only obey. Yeah, there is a guidance for each of us, and by slowly listening, we shall hear the right words. The right word desire. More than anything else, I desired that my son should not be deaf mute. From that desire, I never receded not for a second. Uh, Many years previously, I had written our own limitation. Our only limitations are those we set up in our mind. For the first time, I wondered if that statement was true. Lying on the bed in front of me was a newly born child without natural equipment of hearing, even though he might hear and speak. He was obviously disfigured for life. Surely this was the limitation which that child had not set up in his own mind. What would I do about it? Sometimes I would find a way to transplant into the child's mind my own burning desire for the ways and means of conveying sounds to his brain without the aid of ears. As soon as the child was old enough to cooperate, I would fill his mind so completely with the burning desire to hear that the nature would, by methods of her own, translate it into the physical reality. All this thinking took place in my own mind, but I spoke of it to no one. Every day every day I renewed the pledge I may had made to myself, but not to accept a defeat, deaf mute for a son. As he grew old and began to take notice of the things around him, we observed that he had slight degree of hearing. When he reached the age when the children usually began talking, he made no attempt to speak, but he would tell by his action that he would hear certain sounds slightly. That was all I wanted to know. I was convinced that if he could hear even slightly, he might develop still greater hearing capabilities. Then something happened which gave me hope. It came from entirely unexpected source. We brought a Victoria when the child heard the music for the first time. He went into the extremities and promptly appropriated the machine. He soon showed a preference for the certain records among them. It is a long way to Tripoli. On one occasion, he played that piece over and over for almost 2 hours, standing in front of the Victoria Earl with his teeth clamped in on the edge of the case. The significance of this self-formed habit of his did not become clear to us until years afterwards, for we had never heard of the principles of bone condition of the sound at that time. Shortly after he appropriated the Victoria, I discovered that he could hear me quite clearly when I spoke by with my lips touching his mastodon bone or at the base of the brain. This discovery placed in my possession the necessary media by which I began to translate into the reality my burning desire to help my son develop hearing and speech. By that time, he was making the steps at the speaking certain words. The outlook was far from encouraging, but desire backed by the faith knows no such words as impossible. Having determined that he would never, he could hear the sounds of my voice plainly, I began immediately to transfer to his mind the desire to hear and speak. I soon discovered that the child enjoyed bedtime stories, so I went to work creating stories designed to develop in him the self reliance, imagination, and keen desire to hear and to be normal. There was no one story in particular which I emphasized by giving it more some new and dramatic coloring each time it was told. It was designed to plant in his mind the thought that his affiliation was not a liability but an asset of the great value. Despite the fact that all the philosophies I had examined clearly indicated that every adversity brings with it the seed of equivalent advantage. I must confess that I had not the slightest idea how this affiliation could ever become an asset. But, however, I continued my practice of wrapping that psychology in the bedtime stories, hoping the time would come when he would find some plan by which his handicap would could be made to serve some useful purpose. Reason told me plainly that there was no adequate compensation for the lack of ears and natural hearing equipment. Desire, backed by the faith, pushed the reason aside and inspired me to carry on. As I analyzed the experience in the retrospect, I can see now that my son's faith in me had much to do with the astonishing results. He did not question anything I told him. I sold him the idea that he had a distinct advantage over his older brother, and that his advantage would reflect itself in many ways. For example, the teacher in the school would observe that he had no ears, and because of this, they would show him special attention and treat him with extraordinary kindness. They always did. His mother saw to that by visiting the teachers and arranging with them to give the child the extra attention necessary. I sold him the idea too that when he became old enough to sell the newspaper, his older brother and already become a newspaper merchant. He would have a big advantage over his brother for the reason that the people uh, would pay him extra money for his waves is because they would see that he was a bright industrious boy despite the fact he had no ears. Um, we could we could notice that gradually the child's hearing was improving. Moreover, he had no slightest tendency to be self-conscious because of his affiliation. When he was about 7, he showed the first evidence that our method of servicing his mind was bearing fruit. For several months, he begged for the privilege of the selling newspapers, but his mother would not give her consent, would not give her consent. Her mother would not give her consent to sell the newspapers. To sell the newspapers, she was afraid that his deafness made it unsafe for him to go on the street alone. Finally, he took matters in his own hands. One afternoon, when he was left at home with the servant, he climbed through the kitchen windows, shined to the ground, and set out on his own. He borrowed 6 cents in capital from the neighborhood shoemaker, invested in his papers, sold out, reinvested, and kept repeating until the late in the evening after balancing his account and paying back the 6 cents he had borrowed from his banker. He had a net profit of 42 cents. When we he got home that night, we found him in a bed asleep with the money tightly clenched in his hand. His mother opened his hand, removed the coins, and cried of all things. Crying over her son's first victory seemed so inappropriate. My reaction was reverse. I laughed heartedly, for I knew that my endeavor to plant in the child's mind the attitude of the faith in himself had been successful. His mother saw in his business venture a little deaf boy who had gone out in the street and risked his life to earn money. I saw a brave, ambitious, self-reliant little businessman whose stock in himself had been increased 100% because he had gone into the business on his own initiative and had won. The transactions pleased me because I knew that he had given evidence of the tract of resourcefulness that would go with him all through the life. Later events proved this to be true. When his older brother wanted something, he would lie down on the street floor, kick his feet in the air, cry for it, and get it. When the little deaf boy wanted something, he would plan a way to earn the money, then buy it for himself. He still follows that plan. Truly, my own son had taught me that handicap can be converted into the stepping stones on which one may climb towards some worthy goal, unless they are accepted as obstacles and used as alibis. The little deaf boy went through the grades, high school, and college without being able to hear his teachers expecting when they shouted loudly at close range. He did not go to the school for the deaf. We would not permit him to learn the science language. We were determined that he would should live a normal life associated with the normal children, and we stood by that decision. Although it cost us many heated debates with the school officials, while he was in the high school. He tried an electrical hearing aid, but it was of no value to him. Due he believed to a condition that was disclosed when the child was sick by Doctor Godson of Chicago when he operated on one side of the boy's head and discovered that there was no sign of natural hearing equipment. During his way last week in the college, 18 years after the operation, something happened which marked the most important turning point of his life. Through though through what seemed to be a mere chance, he came into possession of another electrical hearing device which was sent to him on the trial. He was slow about testing it due to the disappointment with the similar device. Finally, he picked the instrument up and more or less carelessly placed it on his head, hooked up the battery, and lo, as if by the stroke of magic, his lifelong desire for normal hearing became a reality. For the first time in his life, he heard practically as well as um, any person with a normal hearing. God moves in mysterious way his wonders to perform. Overjoyed because of the changed world which has been brought to him through his hearing device. He rushed to the telephone, called his mother, and heard her voice perfectly. The next day, he plainly heard the voice of his professor in the class for the first time in his life. Previously, he could hear them only when they shouted at the short range. He heard the radio, he heard the talking pictures for the first time in his life, he could converse freely with other people without necessity of they having to speak loudly. Truly, he had come into the possession of changed world. We had refused to accept the nature's error, and by persistent desire, we had we had by persistence desire we had by persistence desire, we had induced the nature to correct that error through the only practical means available. The desire had commenced to pay the dividend, but the victory was not yet completed. The boy still had to find a definite and practical way to convert his handicap into an equivalent assets. Hardly realizing the significance, hardly realizing the significance, hardly realizing the significance, the boy still had to find a definite and practical way to convert his handicap into equivalent assets. Hardly realizing the significance of what had already been accomplished, but intoxicated with the joy of his newly discovered world of sound, he wrote a letter to the manufacturer of the hearing aid, enthusiastically describing his experience. Something in his letter, something perhaps which was not written on the lines, but back of them caused the company to invite him to the New York. When he arrived, he was escorted through the factory, and while talking with the chief engineer, telling him about his changed world, a hug, an idea, or an inspiration, call it what you wish, flashed into his mind. It was this impulse of thought which converted his affirmation into an asset destined to pay dividend in both money and happiness to thousands of all times to come. The all times to come. The sum and substance of that impulse of thought was this. It occurred to him that he might be of help to millions of deaf people who go through the life without the benefit of hearing device. If he could find a way to tell them the story of his changed world, then and there he reached a decision to devote the remainder of his life to rendering the useful service to the hard of hearing. For an entire month, he carried on intensive research during which he analyzed the entire marketing system of the manufacturer of the hearing device and created ways and means of communicating with the hard of hearing all over the world for the purpose of sharing with them his newly discovered changed world. When his this was done, he put in writing a 2 year plan based upon his finding. When he presented the plan to the company, he was instantly given a position for the purpose of carrying out his ambitious. Little did he dream when he went to work that he was designated to bring hope and practical relief to the thousands of deaf people who, without his help, would have been doomed forever to mutism. Shortly after he became associated with the manufacturer of his this hearing aid. He invited me to attend a class conducted by his company for the purpose of teaching the deaf mutes to hear and to speak. He had never heard of such a form of education. Therefore, I visited the class spectacle but hopeful that my time would not be entirely wasted. Here I saw a demonstration which gave me a greatly enlarged vision of what I had done to arouse and keep alive in my son's mind the desire for normal hearing. I saw the deaf mutes actually being taught to hear and speak through the application of self same principles I had used more than 20 years previously in the saving my son from the deaf mutism. Thus, through the some straight straight right turn of the wheel of faith, my son Blair and I been destined to aid in correcting the deaf mutism for those as yet unborn, because we are only living human beings, as far as I knew, who have established that definitely the fact that the deaf mutism can be corrected to the extent of restoring to the normal life. Those who suffer with this affiliation, it has been done for me. It will be done for others. There is no doubt in my mind that the brave would have been a deaf mute for all his life if his mother and I had not managed to shape his mind as we did. The doctors who attended at his birth told us confidently the child may never hear or speak. A few years ago, Dr. Ealing, a noted specialist on the such cases, examined Blair very thoroughly. He was astonished when he learned how well my son now hears and speaks, and said his examination indicated that theoretically the boy should not be able to hear at all. But lad does hear despite the fact that X-ray pictures shows there is no opening in the skull whatsoever from where his ears should be to the brain. When I planted his mind the desire to hear and talk and live as a normal person, they might They went in with that impulse, some straight influence which caused nature to bring bridge builders and span the gulf of the silence between his brain and the outer world by some means which kindest medical specialists have not been able to interpret. It would be for me or to even conjure as to how the nature performed his miracle. It would be unfavorable if Varyingly, varyingly, a burning desire has a desirous way of transmitting itself into the physical equivalent. Bear desired normal hearing. Now he had as it. He was born with a handicap which might easily have sent one with a less defined desire to the street with a bundle of pencils and a tin cup. That handicap now promises to serve as a medium by which he will render useful service to many millions of hard of hearing also to give him useful employment at adequate financial composition the remainder of his life. The little white lie I planted in his mind when he was a child by lending him to believe his affiliation would become a great asset which he could capitalize has justified itself. Varyingly, there is nothing right or wrong, which belief plus burning desire cannot make real. These qualities are free to everyone. In all of my experience in dealing with men and women who had personal problems, I never handled a single case which more which more definitely demonstrate the power of desire. Authors sometimes make the mistake of writing of the subject of which they have but superficial or very elementary knowledge. It has been my good fortune to have had the privilege of testing the soundness of the power of desire through the affection of my own son. Perhaps it was providential that experience came as it did, for surely no one is better prepared than he to serve as an example of what happens when the desire is put to the test. If Mother Nature bends to the will of desire, is it logical that mirror men and can defeat a burning desire? Straight and imponderable is the power of human minds. We do not understand the method by which it uses every circumstances, every individual, every physical things within its reach as a means of transmitting desire into its practical physical counterpart. Perhaps science will uncover this secret. I planted in my son's mind the desire to hear and to speak as any normal person hear and speak. The desire has now become reality. I planted in his mind the desire to convert his greatest handicap into his greatest asset. That desire has been realized. The modus operandi by which this astonishing results was achieved is not hard to describe. It consisted of definite, three very definite facts. Three very definite facts. The three very definite facts. Facts. The mixed faith with the desire for the normal hearing, which I passed on to my son. The second, I communicated my desire to him in every convincible way available through persistence, continuous efforts over a period of years. Third, he believed me. As this chapter was being completed, news came of the death of the one short paragraph in the news dispatch gave the clue to this unusual woman's spirited success as a singer. I quote the paragraph because the clue it contains is none of the other than desire. Early in her guided me. He visited the director of Vina Court Opera to have him test her voice, but he did not test it. After taking one look at the awkward and poorly dressed girl, he examined her none too gently, with such a face and with no personality at all. How can you ever expect to succeed in opera? My good child gave up the idea by a sewing machine and go to work. You can never be a singer. Um, Never is a long time. The director of Vienna Court Opera knew much about the techniques of singing. He knew little about the power of desire. When he assumes the proposition of an opposition, if he had known more of that power, he would not have made the mistake of condemning the genius without giving it an opportunity. Several years ago, one of my business associates became ill. He became he became worse as time went on and finally was taken to the hospital for an operation. Just before he was wheeled into the operation room, I took a look at him and wondered how anyone as thin and emaciated as he would possibly go through a major operation successfully. The doctors warned me that there was a little, if any, chance of my ever seeing him alive again. But that was the doctor's opinion. It was not the opinion of the patient. Just before he was wheeled away, he whispered feebly, "Do not be disturbed, Chief. I will be out of here in a few days." The attending nurse looked at me and with a pity. But the patient did come through it safely. After it was all over, his physician said nothing but his own desire to leave saved him. He never would have pulled through if he had not refused to accept the possibility of death. I believe in the power of desire backed by the faith because I have been this power lift men from the lowly beginning to the place of power and wealth. I have seen it rob the graves of its victims. I have seen it serve as a medium by which men stage a comeback after having been defeated in the hundred different ways. I have seen it provide my own son with a normal, happy, successful despite natural nature's having sent him into the world without ears. How can one harness and use the power of desire? This has been answered through this and the subsequent chapters of this book. This message is going out to the world at the end of the longest and perhaps the most devastating depression America has ever known. It is reasonable to presume that the message may come to the attention of many who have been wounded by the depression, those who have lost their fortunes, those who have lost their positions, and great numbers who must recognize their plans and stage a comeback. To all this, I wish to convey the thought that all achievements, no matter what may be its nature or its purpose, must begin with intense desire, burning desire for something definite. Though some struggle and powerful nature of mental chemistry, which she has never divulged. Nature wraps up in the impulse of strong desire that something something which recognizes no such word as impossible and accepts no such reality as a failure. This is the very powerful chapter. I would request everybody to purchase this book and read this chapter thoroughly. Hear this audio tape as it gives a very powerful message that desire is the starting point, and without desire, you cannot achieve anything. Great leaders, great personalities have achieved because they had a burning desire to achieve the new things and they could achieve it. I have a desire to create the ebook and make it available to all who are not interested in reading but listening. I when I read this book, this chapter, I had a tears in my ears, eyes, that how the author, so famous author, had to go and struggle, and ultimately he was successful for his son. But we see that life teaches us lessons, and only desire can make us more successful. So let us have desire. Start your day with a desire that you will be successful. Failure are the stepping stones, but desires will make the stepping stone a success. Anybody who fails should not think that he is failed for the permanently. He is only a one step below the success, and he should try again to achieve the success. I would request all of you to subscribe to the channel, like, comments on this powerful book, and recommend you to purchase the book. Thank you very much. Have a great day.